The point being, there's an immense supply chain in a loaf of bread. When you go through, wrapper, baker, ingredients, wheat, farmer, transportation, et cetera, and every link in that supply chain has its own supply chains of, where trucking firms get the truck drivers, et cetera, and on and on and on.
Jim Rickards, the renowned financial commentator and New York Times best-selling author, has recently warned that the global economy is heading for a catastrophic collapse. In his most recent interview about the collapse of the supply chain, Rickards cites numerous examples of the current economic crisis and explores the implications of this breakdown on the world financial system. As the world economy continues to suffer from the effects of the pandemic, Rickards' warning is becoming increasingly relevant. His dire predictions have been further bolstered by the numerous reports of supply chain disruption and the turbulent stock market. With the world facing a financial crisis of unprecedented magnitude, Rickards' analysis of the current economic landscape and supply chain in his latest book #SoldOut is a must-read for anyone interested in the future of the global economy. Rickards posted on his Twitter account about what the book entails, which is why the supply chain collapsed, why it will never be the same, and why economic collapse is not far behind. Welcome back to our channel. In this video, we will explore Jim Rickards' view on why he says it's over for us all as the supply chain has collapsed. Please watch, like, and share this video. Also, drop your comments and thoughts below, and remember to subscribe to the channel for more related content similar to this. We begin with another short clip of Jim Rickards.
I came to the conclusion, I say this in the book, that the supply chain is not part of the economy. The supply chain is the economy. There's nothing you can think of that doesn't have a supply chain behind it. Now, that's true. And then you stretch these things immensely to cut costs. You've created an enormous fragility. And I give you a real concrete example. So, Germany's a major car manufacturer. You got Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, and BMW, and others. There's several hundred miles of wire in a car, with all the controls and hydraulics, electronics, et cetera. And you can't just throw the wires all over the car. There are conduits, there are plastic conduits that they install, and then they run the wires through it to wherever they need to go. Those conduits are made by a firm in Ukraine. Well, Ukraine's got a few problems right now, including war, and they can't get them. So BMW and Volkswagen had to shut down assembly lines for sophisticated automobiles, not because they couldn't get chassis or leather seats, because they couldn't get this plastic part, because you got to put that on first, so you run all the wires through it. So, okay, so the war in Ukraine is a big subject in and of itself, but for the lack of a plastic part, a conduit, you had to shut down major automobile assembly lines in Germany. I could give 100 examples, Dave, but the point is, you see the point, which is that in the name of efficiency and lowering costs, we've created enormous fragility, and now it's all breaking down, and it's going to be a big job, 5 to 10 year job to put it back together.
The world has changed. We are no longer living in an age of abundance and easy access to the goods and services we rely on. We have entered an age of uncertainty and disruption, an age where the global supply chain has collapsed. The supply chain, once a reliable source of global economic growth and stability, is now a broken system that has left many people struggling to find the things they need. Businesses have been forced to close while others, desperate to stay afloat, have resorted to drastic measures. Consumers have been left without the products they need, and entire industries have been forced to reevaluate their supply chains. The disruption has had a ripple effect across the global economy, impacting both the supply and demand sides of the equation. The dire consequences of the breakdown of the global supply chain are being felt by everyone, from large corporations to individuals, and the effects are likely to linger for some time. Listen to these carefully.
My point, Dave, is that the virus came from the lab in Wuhan. Masks don't work, lockdowns don't work, the vaccines aren't vaccines. I said all that in 2020 based on evidence. I mean, it wasn't guesswork. So then in early 2022, people were saying, the latest research shows that masks don't work. It's like, duh. Yeah, that was well known. There's no research. Even what about surgeons in a surgical room? They've shown empirically that surgery rooms are safe because they're highly germ free. They're like everything's sterilized and they're closed. That's why, and it's not the dopey mask that the doctor wears, it's the fact that you're in a sterilized environment. So my point being, the public policy response was worse than ignorant, worse than incompetent. It had a purpose. Inside every government bureaucrat is an inner fascist waiting to come out. And they were all empowered by COVID. Now you get into politics. The Democrats are like, hey, let's change all the voting rules while we're at it. As Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. We're still living with that. What it really destroyed, it destroyed a lot of things. It destroyed trust, but it really destroyed confidence in experts. And now here we are in the supply chain crisis, still going strong in 2022. And you've got these economists giving recommendations, but nobody wants to listen to them, nor should you, because they actually don't know what they're doing.
Rickards believes that the supply chain is not part of the economy, but it is actually the economy. The current system of global supply and demand has been disrupted to such a degree that the consequences will be felt worldwide. The only way to avert an economic collapse is for governments to act quickly and decisively. By understanding the scope of the problem and its causes, governments can take the necessary steps to mitigate the damage and rebuild the global economy. Rickards' warnings are indeed sobering, but it is clear that the world is at a critical juncture and decisive action must be taken. Listen to these carefully.
This is still going on, and it is a contributor to the supply chain breakdown. I want to come back to that because you made the point that COVID and the pandemic panic and the bad public policy made the supply chain worse, which it did, but it wasn't the start of it. And I'll come back to that, what actually was the start. But in terms of what's going on now, look at China's zero COVID policy. Now, that makes no sense. It's a top-down Communist Party directive. One person tests positive, they put you in isolation. 3 people test positive, they shut a whole neighborhood. 100 people test positive, they shut down cities. Shanghai, 26 million people locked down last spring. Beijing, 22 million people locked down last spring, and so forth. And of course, this is destroying China's economy. They lie about their numbers, but to the extent we can see through that and get independent sources, it looks like China's growth is going to drop. It's actually a recession right now. From an economy that went 30 years at 10% annual compounded, they're actually shrinking. Okay, so that's ridiculous, destructive public policy.
The global pandemic has caused a dramatic shift in the way the world works, including supply chains. The pandemic has caused massive disruption throughout the world, and the supply chain has been no exception. Many companies have been forced to completely rethink their supply chains, resulting in the collapse of many of them. This collapse has had a ripple effect on the global economy, with businesses of all kinds facing unprecedented challenges. The collapse of the supply chain has caused a major shift in the way we source goods and materials, resulting in higher prices and decreased availability. With the future of the supply chain uncertain, it's time to take a closer look at what this collapse means for the global economy and how it affects us all. Listen to these carefully.
But why are they in that situation? How is it the case that the U.S. got out of it with a lot of bad policy, but it's kind of behind us? Europe, same thing, bad choices, but kind of behind us. And it's not behind in China. The answer is herd immunity. And I've said many times, the cure for COVID is COVID. If you get COVID, first of all, the mortality rate is a fraction of 1%, and every death is a tragedy, but it's about 0.2%, which is no more than a normal seasonal flu. The other 99.8% get through it just fine. Some cases worse than others, some inconvenience, but you get through it. But the natural antibodies that you develop from having COVID are the best immunization against getting COVID again. You can get it twice. Again, I recognize that, but that's a stronger natural response than these phony vaccines. And we got through that, and we're at that point. China never did it because they never used Western so-called vaccines. Their own vaccines are highly deficient. They do have an aging population, and they were never willing to kind of like take the pain and get through it. So they've got a population that by and large has not had COVID, and they don't have any real treatment protocols. And so they keep locking down and locking down. Well, that buys you a little short-term relief, but there's at an enormous immediate cost in terms of economics and a greater long-term epidemiological cost in the sense that your population never gets to so-called herd immunity. And so it's never going to end if they keep doing it. So this is a major, it's again, public policy and health policy failure, but it's an even bigger impediment to getting the supply chain going again, and it won't.
It's the end of an era. After years of reliable service, the global supply chain has collapsed, leaving businesses and consumers in a state of confusion and panic. The disruption of the supply chain has been felt around the world as companies scramble to adjust their strategies and operations to cope with the new reality. It has been a challenging time for everyone involved, and the aftershocks are continuing to be felt. But perhaps the biggest question is, what will happen next? Will we see a return to the days of reliable supply chains, or have we entered a new era of uncertainty? Whatever the answer, one thing is for sure, it's time to start looking for solutions. Thanks for watching. Kindly share this video with your family and friends, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more updates. Anticipate our next video.